The opposite of ice is not fire, it's steam, and I'm sick of pretending it's not. How on earth could fire be the opposite of ice? Hot is the opposite of cold, cold water is ice and hot water is steam. How did we get to such a place where the opposite of ice is fire? Opposites don't really exist. They're more a literary device than a solid concept or idea. It's like saying a cat is the opposite of a dog. People will agree for some reason, but it doesn't make any sense. Dark is the opposite of light, but light is a thing and dark is simply the absence of that thing, not its opposite. It's all just loose shit, honestly. That makes sense, but I think people wanted it to not be in the H2O category. Nah. Ice, or water sometimes, is the opposite of fire in that, ice is cold. Fire is hot. One is corporeal, steam is, kinda, the other isn't. They can't be transformed into each other. They are pretty opposite. People say it's fire BCS. Usually we use fire to heat up things or, well, light them on fire. And water to cool them down. Although this is technically the truth, BCS steam is the polar opposite of ice. Not popular or unpopular, not even thought of. If you don't understand how we got here, you might be young. But I don't know how young one would need to be to not understand how we got to fire and ice not being opposites. The opposite of steam is epic games. Cold water is ice and hot water is steam. True. However, cold rocks are just icy rocks that never do anything exciting, while hot rocks are lava that create new land masses and melt whole cities. Solid is opposite to gas. Physic. I love it when smart people act stupid. Technically, if you continued to heat steam, you'd create a plasma, so you're still wrong. Have an upvote. Steam and ice are the same thing. You need to find the opposite of H2O, which isn't a thing. Finally, a real unpopular opinion. Ice is still and fire is amoving. Ice is stuck in one state and fire is active transitioning of a material from one state to another. Ice is preservation, fire is destruction. The opposite of water is fire. The four basic elements are earth, fire, air, and water. Spirit is not considered an element, but if the binding item that keeps all elements in alignment. Ice is a combination of air and water, so if you wanted to go exact opposite, it should be the combination of fire and earth, or magma/lava. It's just because ice is cold and fire is hot, not something people have against you. When things get really cold, they usually get icy. When things get really hot, they often burst into flames. That's why ice is the opposite of fire. You make a valid point, but I have to ask, how often does this come up that you have formed such a strong opinion about it? What's the opposite of fire then? Probably because water is seen as the opposite of fire and ice is still water. Remember, when talking about the opposite of ice and fire, people are usually thinking of magic and not real-world application. Water is the opposite of fire. Since ice is solid water, on the opposite end there should be liquid fire, which is lava. Lava is the opposite of ice. Fire is used to make steam, so it's an elemental thing, not a scientific thing, it's a stone thing. And since both ice and steam are water, that makes water the real opposite of fire, and not ice. Mix these two elements together with earth and wind, and you got yourself all the classical elements together in the same room, like it's the four elemental nations and their benders from Avatar, The Last Airbender and the Legend of Korra. Fire and ice just has a better ring to it than fire and steam. Opposite could reasonably be defined as the least similar, right? Well, ice is water and so is steam, so that's already one similarity that fire doesn't have. So fire might not be the opposite, but it's closer to the opposite than steam. Alright, so what's the opposite of fire? Have you considered plasma as a state? If you want to get technical, it should be plasma. This is the funniest thing I've seen all day. So passionate, yet so right. Fire's plasma, ice is solid. They're at opposite ends of the matter state spectrum. Ice is cold, hard, and wet. Its opposite should be hot, soft, and dry. Fire is more of an opposite than steam. This isn't an opinion. It's mangled thought. Yes, the direct opposite of that is I'm fact steam, but the polar opposite works like this. Solid and cold water is ice. Hot and steam lava is fire, which might actually be a plasma, but that's besides the point. I'm another case. You have water and fire and ice and lava. Then again, no one has actually said that statement, and you might just be going off the band. Because ice is the cold thing that can burn your skin, and fire is the hot thing that can also burn your skin. Ice can be wet, fire cannot. Ice is endothermic, fire is exothermic. Ice has water, fire does not have water. Ice is a solid, fire is not solid. Ice absorbs and reflects light, fire emits light. Who even said that fire is the opposite of ice? The saying is fire and ice, not fire, the opposite of ice. Nobody has even said that except you. Shouldn't it be? Water to fire. Ice to lava. This comes from ancient Greece. Everything is made out of 4 elements. Water is the opposite of fire. Water without any heat, fire, becomes ice. So steam/liquid water is a combination of water plus fire. A person would be categorized into one of the 4 elements personality-wise, and it would be used for medicine. This goes hand in hand with the idea of people being made up of 4 main components, and we get sick when there is an imbalance. I also disagree that steam is the opposite of water. Even plasma being the opposite is incorrect. It is still the same thing, just in a different form. I really don't care. What's the opposite of anal retentive? Well, hot and cold aren't physical objecta, more so adjectives for them. Fire and ice are opposites because the biggest representation of hot and cold are fire and ice respectively, so we pair them. Anyway, opposites are more just human concepts on how we perceive things. An element can't be the opposite of itself when it has a different form. Steam is simply water's hottest possible form, it's in no way the opposite of water. I've read many of these posts. They seem to have gone off the rails from the original debate about fire and ice. I'm afraid I haven't helped that at all. But these posts have surely been entertaining. The opposite of opposite? That's fun. This whole discussion reminds me of my first class in college. We all had to prove that we existed in the world. We had all semester to prove it. The next class I showed my professor the tuition bill I received each month, but he wasn't impressed. Then I spent a couple of weeks doing several things that I thought proved that I existed. But he said he's looking for something different. Yep, he's a big pain in the butt, right? So I decided to skip the rest of my classes. I skipped every class. I skipped the midterm, and I skipped the final exam. A few weeks later I got my report card. It had a big fat F for my philosophy class. I ran it all the way up to the 6th floor, the philosophy department, and I found my professor. I asked him how he could grade me if I didn't exist. Hoo hoo, that was fun.